Good afternoon. I'm Susan Sprung, Associate National Executive Director of the Producers Guild. This afternoon's session is Courting the Female Audience. First, I'd like to thank the Television Academy, our sponsor for this session. This is the first time we've done a panel like this. It's a timely topic, as you can see from the success of all the shows represented. And today, you're going to learn that their success was no accident, or was it? Finding and keeping a strong female following made all the difference for our panelists. Let's hear how they did it. We're happy to have with us today Debra Birnbaum, contributing editor at Variety, for today's moderator. Debra?
Thanks, everyone. I'm honored to be here today. For obvious reasons, this is a subject near and dear to my heart. Okay. I thought it was funnier when I wrote it, but all right. That usually happens to me. That's fine. All right, let me introduce our panelists. Sorry.
That's why we have women's television.
Exactly. This is why I'm a writer and not a TV writer. Thank you. We have Brock-Akil, the principal of Akil Productions and creator of the hit shows Being Mary Jane, The Game, and Girlfriends. Marc Juris, the president and general manager of WeTV. Amy Lippman, the executive producer of Masters of Sex. And also with her credits, Party of Five and In Treatment, some of my favorite shows. And Matt Warburton, the executive producer of the Mindy Project, as well as the producer of The Simpsons and Community. So we are here to ask the universal question, what do women want? So let's start with the first question. What are female audiences looking for, and how is it different than what male audiences are looking for? Anyone want to tackle that one?
I'll give it a shot. I think that I really don't separate by gender as much as I do by psychographic, because when we were at True, we discovered that men in their 40s and women in their 20s have very similar tastes in television, which is pretty surprising. But they tend to like that same action-packed, intense programming. I think as women get later on, their tastes start to change. So I would actually say I like to look at groups of interests, sort of target areas of interest. And I do feel that in general, if I were to speak in generalizations, women like more narrative. I think they like characters that reflect themselves, that they can relate to. And you see that all the time. And I think more modern and contemporary, representations of themselves.
Mara, how do you feel about that?
For me, it started off really from my own personal desire. I was a consumer of television and film, and I enjoyed it, but I felt like a lot was missing. And so instead of sort of complaining about it, sort of decided to write about it. And I think as I've explored it over the years, I really just feel like, and all due respect to procedurals and things of that nature, it's just that was never, I could participate for an episode or two, but it never drew me in as much as it was the nuance and the complexity of human expression, exactly, not just for women, but as we related in our relationships. One of the things I say about Being Mary Jane, her life is not a car chase or a murder mystery to solve. It's just enough, and the drama in her life is just enough to get through the day. Like for me, how I just got here today was enough. and I feel like we don't get into the minutia of life, and I think that's where it has been a relatable success for me in women's programming.
Amy, how about you?
Well, I would say, like Mark, I don't differentiate at all. I think my job is to sell a network on a great show, and if they see that there's a possibility to nurture a male audience and a female audience, or if they, in my case, I guess with the shows that I've worked on, often it appeals to women first and then men come along. That's been my experience, is a lot of men who approach me in the context of talking about my work. Say, oh, my wife my wife watched it. That's what I hear a lot of. But I never think about that in the work that I do, except for the fact that I am only interested in very small moments. I have to say I've never been able to follow a procedural show. I mean, I can't track it. I'm only interested in. I find I'm only interested in like people sitting in their kitchen talking about why their marriage isn't working. Like that's it. That's the only thing that interests me. Sometimes you could throw disease in. That seems interesting to me. But it's I think everything that I've worked on that has gone on to any kind of success can really be reduced down to a show about small, relatable moments. Even when, in the case of Masters of Sex, I'm writing in 1957, 1958, 1959. I think there's still relatable moments, and I imagine that's what draws women in.
You know, I would like to say though, because you're young, and usually
that
procedurals
young.
historically.
Yes.
Well, you look fabulous for young.
Thank you.
Usually procedurals are 50 plus. Females 50 plus seem to like procedurals a lot. And I think that, again, it is a sort of,
As you move along.
as you move along, they become really very comfortable. You know, and I think and a lot of women watch them. And believe me, I programmed a lot of them, so I knew it's an easy way to get a good rating. Because there's something about that process.
That's right.
Of right and wrong and guilty and, you know, all will be okay, good triumphs over evil, and sort of that mystery that really will deliver a 50-plus audience in a big way.
Right.
But you bring up an interesting point about procedurals, because sometimes it concerns me when I watch them and they depict the rape and torture of women, and I find that really hard to watch.
I don't make them, so I can't
No,
tell you
but,
how
I mean,
to do
but, how, but how do you
And I don't
feel,
watch them either, so I...
But how do you feel about that as a programmer?
You know, unfortunately, obviously it works, and it works in some psychological way that appeals to the audience. So I think audiences have become somewhat desensitized. I can't watch that kind of stuff. I couldn't even watch the Game of Thrones where he pulled the eyes out of his head, so that freaked me out. So
I watched it 100 times. It was the best thing ever.
So for me, as personally, I would have a hard time programming it, but I can understand from a business and a programming practical point of view, it's what people want.
Matt, why don't you talk about the comedy side of programming?
Yeah, well, I mean, having worked on some very male-skewing comedy shows and now working on the Mindy Project, which has a substantial, wonderful female audience, the takeaway from the comedy end of things that I've had is that female audiences are much more discerning and demanding about the quality of your show. You know, I think a lot of times working on comedy, men, if you have a fart joke and an explosion, they're going to go away happy. And I say that as a fan of fart jokes and explosions. But when you want to reach out and you know, create a show that appeals to everybody ideally, but to women in particular, I mean, you have to have realistic characters, grounded emotions, stories that make sense, in addition to great jokes. And so, you know, it's actually, it's a wonderful challenge to make something that appeals to everybody, but to women in particular, because I do think that in my experience, women pay the closest attention to what they're watching. They care about the quality of it. And when you make a wrong move, we're going to hear about it online from our dedicated female followers who are just like, you know what, that character would not have said that. And we'll go back and be like, yeah, they're right. We should have thought of that. And so, you know, I think there are, at least on the comedy end, some real differences between the audiences that are fascinating.
How much pressure do you feel to write towards a happy ending, you know, from a romantic comedy perspective, to get those two characters together?
You know, I feel like audiences sometimes they want something that's going to ruin the show.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, everybody ideally wants something where everybody finally gets over their differences and finally comes together. And so it's always a balance of like, you don't want to have two characters that are together break up 100 different times. It loses its effect. Mm-hmm. But also you have to have every difference of opinion, every conflict come from a place of reality where if the audience feels like, oh, I've had an argument like that, or I've had a breakup like that, they won't feel jerked around. But it's a very nuancey thing.
I want to go back to your point about, you were saying it's hard to watch rape and victimization of women. One of the things I've had fun and Amy was making us, as you as well, joining the conversation about sex in general about women and the overall balance of the images of sexuality and women's desire to have sex. And I personally feel like even just slightly projecting that empowers young women, even though you're talking about sex, it actually, what you're, hopefully, if written well, and you're not saying it, but you're saying it, is that you have a choice. And if you have a choice, you're responsible for it. And thus, if you're responsible, you will say, you know, put the condom on or whatever. But it's very, it's been very, one thing I find, particularly with African American women, which has primarily been my characters that I've written about, it's black women who are sometimes the most nervous to have that conversation because they also, at the same time, although I believe it's doing a good thing, it can also make people scared if you mess it up. So I feel like, I don't know if in terms of women audience, do we put too much pressure not only on the producers or on ourselves about our image. You know what I'm saying? It's sometimes, and more specifically, I say for women in general, but I also say even as a woman of color, it sort of puts too much of the conversation out there that is both engaging, equaling success, hopefully pushing forward and creating balance for the images that you mentioned. But it also can be very sort of like, going back to the blogs, Matt, what the fuck are you doing? So it's very interesting to walk that line, but it's fun to talk about it.
Absolutely.
Well, women are much more likely to engage online and start and have a conversation. We also, you know, our network might not be huge, but we're often number 3 or 2 in social media on Thursday nights. So it is that is also part of the audience experience, I think, is the conversation and the community that's built around that conversation.
Yeah.
I will say that's a relatively new experience for me. Not, I know it's been out in the world, but I haven't had immediate feedback to my work in the way that I have on the show that I'm doing right now. And it's very strange that you can within, you know, when you're expecting a nice call from your mother, before that happens, like 50 people have weighed in on what you've done. And I find actually, I'm surprised at the extent to which they give you the benefit of the doubt. I have to say that I don't know if I'm responding necessarily to viewers, or there's a lot of criticism that, I mean, like people who want to talk about the show or recap the show. And to me, there was always a delay in feeling out how an audience was responding. So it does feel like a new experience to me that I can tell within a day if I've hit a nerve or if people have understood what my intention was. Sometimes people give me credit for thinking much more deeply about something than I actually have. I think
Just
that
accept
actually-
it.
Yes, I meant that. I thought that was a genius analogy.
Do you let it get to you?
I
Does it-
don't. I don't actually. I really don't, because I myself am a dinosaur and I don't actually engage in that.
Because I was reading that Damon Lindelof still can't get over the lost
I know.
thing with everyone
Damon,
who
I know. Let go, Damon.
talked about it online. I know, he really is.
Yeah, no. I think it was really traumatic for him. But also, that show had such a
Fanatic.
fall. Yeah, and that was. It was sort of as if that venue belonged to that audience. I mean, those were the people who were online and talking about how it should end and expressing responses to how it ends. I would imagine your show too, probably certainly more than mine, that that you know how it's landing almost immediately.
Yeah,
you know?
it's been very, I mean, what's nice about it is because as a network show, we still live and die by our next day ratings. And with, you know, DVRs and stuff, everything is delaying. Am I going to watch this tomorrow? Am I going to watch this a week from now? What's nice about being on a show that has a really intense social media presence, and like all of our writers are on Twitter all the time, and Mindy, you know, is the absolute master of this world. It gets our audience excited to watch the show right when it's on, because they know there's going to be this frothy conversation happening, and the second it's
a
over,
conversation happening simultaneous to the broadcast.
or that
of it.
night, yeah. But it makes, I think it prioritizes the show in people's minds, so they want to watch it that day, which I think as I said, being on a network, this is still, it still plays by the old rules. It's enormously helpful. So I think social media, which, is a brand new technology, is actually helping the sort of oldest model in television, the network world. And like for us, it's been nothing but valuable. And it's so great. I mean, like our room will stop when the Mindy project airs on the East Coast because we're so excited to just get that live feedback, like a ticker tape,
Yeah.
like, and see, oh, people love that first joke. Oh, people are really worried about what's going to happen. And it's very exciting for us. It's like the most exciting half hour of the week when we get
Does
to
that then drive your storytelling? Like if they're not responding to something or reacting to something badly, does that impact where you're going to go with the show?
No, not really. I think that it's more just like, maybe the more positive way of putting that is like when people really like something, we know that we can go to that well again and people will be respond to it. But I don't think we ever let the tail wag the dog. That's a short-term thinking anyway. They're going to be mad at you, one way or the other.
Yeah, I got
Mara, how about you? Does social media drive your storytelling at all?
Oh, social media saved my career. I mean, it's the game was canceled on the CW, and social media literally drove it and yelled to BET to buy it, and we land on BET, and we made cable history in terms of the premiere numbers were still there, and so and it's created a direct conversation with the audience. But I agree, I can't be dictated by the audience. I feel like the engagement itself is something that is a great measure. And it's very, oh gosh, I'm very supportive and thankful to the audience to have that dialogue and that support. And even now with the new show, Being Mary Jane, I think it's created a place to even sort of talk back, so to speak. It's funny, that's the name of our show, but talk back to us about what we're doing, and then topically going off, like we did a whole conversation about the side chick, or the other woman, or the mistress, or whatever you want to call them, but currently they're called side chicks. So, or number two, and so that just took a whole, it took a life on its own, like even Tumblr with all these sort of conversations about it, and it was fun to see that we started a conversation. Now, where we land today about that subject matter, I don't know, but.
Well, it does create engagement, a much deeper
Yes.
level of engagement where your audience is more dependable, those that are interacting with the cast. It does bring them into that world and give them a sense of having some influence with the show and connection that goes far deeper than we ever had in broadcast or cable.
And I think it speaks to the fact that I would like to believe that I also sort of delve into the minutia or small moments or quiet moments. And what it does is it leaves interpretation. It leaves for the place of conversation. Whereas when you kill somebody, they're just dead, and so they're, it's not really much more to talk about after the plot, the bigger plots are
Yeah,
happening.
there are lots of reasons why a marriage can end.
Yes,
Lots and lots of reasons.
Well, we explored affair too, and those people siding with the characters or not, or the position that we were taking. It was fun. It was fun. It created a larger show inside the 40-minute show that we have.
I will also say, though, that I think people have a misconception about how responsive you can be to immediate feedback, because, I mean, I can just speak for our own production schedule. By the time a show airs, in some instances last season, we were finished before the first episode aired. So the time to respond to any feedback was in a second season, and so there was just no turning that boat around. We were sort of headed where we were headed, and I think of shows like Shonda shows that also have a huge social media component, that she can almost be more reactive when you're doing 22 or 24 episodes a year. We're doing 13, and by the time our show airs this season, we will be almost done with writing and producing episodes. So it's very hard to react in an immediate way.
But they are, even her show, there's a lot of time
There is,
between
there is,
a
that's
tweet
true.
and getting on the air,
Right, but
right?
it's still, she's still in the process of writing when her first episode airs, I think. So she might be able to address it in the same season, and for us, it's just almost an impossibility.
Right, she might have an opportunity to sort of turn a character, make a bigger character, pick
That's
up a
right,
character, make
right.
a character that was going to be a guest star or a recurring character.
Yeah.
That opportunity exists.
Right, that's true.
Mark, as a programmer, how much does social media impact the decision you have to pick up a pilot? Or did you look, where's the formula where you look at ratings in social media?
Well, unfortunately, we only paid on ratings, so the show has to really rate well. I sort of have a philosophy that there's no point in a second screen unless the first screen is great. And I think a lot of people just do all this digital stuff because advertisers ask for it, or it seems very contemporary, and we got to do it because everyone's doing it. But really, you have to have shows that they want to tweet to you or to you and get involved and get engaged. So I really find that it's great. It's a great tool for immediate feedback. It's a great tool to run around the office and say, look, we're number 2 on social media. But the people I work for ultimately get paid on the ratings, and they want to see great ratings.
Do you think that's going to change, though, over time? I mean, do people rely, I mean, for example, I hear you say that social media plays a huge part in the response to the show.
Yeah.
But, for example, I don't know if is it reflected in your numbers? Is it, like, do you care about that? I mean, are you...
Do you hear from the network? Does the network talk to you about it?
Our network is aware of it. I mean, still, I feel like I said, the model is still based on the actual eyeballs the night the show airs. But I definitely have sensed, especially at Fox, which tends to be a very, in my opinion, very forward-leaning network when it comes to social media and stuff, that broader world of, like, this is a show that gets talked about. This is something that, especially in demographics that are important to advertisers, people want to talk about it online, definitely plays into their thinking about the schedule and where to put a show and whether to keep a show or not. And so it's nothing but beneficial to us
It's additive.
to be part of that conversation.
I think it's additive. I don't think that
Yeah.
it would get a show on the air unless you have some huge,
Yeah.
something coming from another network. When you see there's a huge fan base, then perhaps. But I think every day it's a good thing to have, and it's a good thing to know you're engaging people, and it's a good thing to see that grow.
Yeah. It takes a while. I mean, I think it took, we only noticed a sort of ongoing conversation in season 2. Like, it took a while for, I think you have individual fans pop up, and then it takes a while for them to find each other, and then they become like a fan community. And that has to be organic. And luckily, I get to work with people who gave us the time to let that happen.
Yeah.
They have to want to do it and get
No,
involved.
absolutely. Yeah.
Get involved with the audience.
Yeah.
What do you think women's viewing habits are? Do you think that they sit down at 8 o'clock at night and tune into shows? Or do you think it's sort of more generational, that, women are, younger age or cord cutters?
Well, I could tell you when we were at Court TV, I was shocked to see our overnight ratings, starting at midnight, actually go up. They were our strongest ratings because women love to sit in bed and watch procedurals all night long. I don't know what they're doing. They're not sleeping, but older women, not young women.
like myself, yes.
So I think it is all, I would never schedule a procedural or anything involving at 8 o'clock because, life is busy at 8 o'clock. You have the kids, you have dinner, you have a million things you're getting done. Something that requires a lot of thought is 10 o'clock. Sitcoms are easy at 8. Clip shows are easy at 8. So I think you have to be mindful of the audience and what they're doing in their life because you want their attention. And then, of course, you have the whole DVR thing, which throws everything into total chaos. And for us on Thursday night, Shonda rhymes because she just writes a show, and we say goodbye to our audience for a little while, and they come back. But we just,
But I'm interested to know how, for example, I don't watch anything on live television anymore. Does any, I can't. Scandal. Scandal, you watch live? Anyone else watch programs live?
when you say live, do you mean like
Why do you watch
that
it live? I'm
night?
just curious.
You watch it at the actual time? No, I.
Because I'll start like 20 minutes in.
Right. You mean because then you skip through commercials?
Yes.
It's interesting for a network person
Cutting
to
my
actually
own.
say.
No, believe me, I didn't say that, by the way. That's because I go back and I watch the commercials privately.
Right, privately. That's the best. Yes, that private commercial viewing is really
Get really
is
engaged in it.
The best.
Because as much as I hear, sorry, go ahead.
I know for Being Mary Jane, we had our first season was we premiered as a movie, and that got a lot of buzz. We had a big cliffhanger off of that, off the movie. So when the 8 episodes, we only had 8 episodes. So it was interesting. It was almost like binge watching on TV, and no one wanted, and because it's such a social media conversation during the show, people don't want to be left out of the conversation, or they don't want to know, so they need to tune in. And I think I know a lot of friends from the West Coast. They were like, I just stay off of Twitter on Tuesday because everyone's going to tell all the business, and I don't want to know what, you know. And so that's been fun. And so I think the limited run actually has kept the intensity. So the not. Yeah. So it's,
Yes, that's why we lose to Sean's on Thursday night,
yeah,
because
yeah.
everyone has to watch Scandal.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to, you know. But I also find that,
And it's at 10 o'clock. Oh, I want to say, and it's at 10 o'clock. So I do think the kids are in bed. The
Yeah,
kids are in
10 o'clock
that
is
was my big
important.
point. That the kids are in bed, you've had a chance to take a break, a breather, and then, you know, you can pop a glass of wine and, not pop it, you mean pour it. Is what I mean.
well,
Yeah.
champagne.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And so anyway, so I think that has been, I hear, even on the Twitter, they'll say, I've got my glass of wine, I'm ready to watch the show. It's on in 10 minutes. So I do think women, the kids are in bed, the duties are done.
And Netflix has helped quite a bit. I
Yeah.
don't know, I have a weird relationship with Netflix. It can be good, but I feel ultimately it won't be. But for now, at least, it does allow people to catch up on shows that they normally, we saw that with Breaking Bad. They were able to just
Yeah.
watch it all and then get themselves totally into it, so that the season picked up. Really, the 3rd season, I think, it was really when it took off.
Yeah.
So there's that benefit of,
Word of mouth and have a place to go to catch up so you can get caught up on the conversation and then drive.
and Scandal did something interesting, because I did not watch it the first season, and then I went on demand, and I put episode 1 on, but it was actually a 1-hour compilation of the whole first season.
Does it catch you up?
Yeah, and it was like, first I didn't know what I was watching. Like, this is, boy, this goes fast.
Yeah.
But
Most
it really
episodes
What's
just,
episode 2 going to be like? This is crazy.
That's a smart idea.
it was a very smart idea, because it really caught me right up, and then I was into the 2nd season, and I
You didn't feel left behind.
didn't feel left behind, and even I go watch it. But I watch it on, after WeTV's original programming is over.
I think the ideal is if you could find a way
waste 2
for
things at once.
your audience to be able to catch up very quickly, either on Hulu or Netflix, but make the new episodes essential to watch the night of. I think that if you can find a way to do that, you've sort of figured it all out. And I think any show that's on Netflix has a huge advantage because it's so easy to catch up. And our show's now on Hulu Plus, which has also helped us, even though it's a smaller subscriber base. But the ideal is, one person who watches the show tells their friend about it, and they can start catching up that night. And every show is finding its own way to make that as easy as possible.
Yeah, it's interesting working on a cable show that doesn't put material out on Hulu or Netflix. I mean, you have to have Showtime to watch it, and obviously Showtime is not interested in laying it off other places because they're subscriber based and they have to. So the thing that I encounter a lot is I can't catch up. I mean, can I join it in the second season? Like, how do I watch the first season? I think it's a real stumbling block in a way, because people are now used to these new avenues, and they understand that if there's a show that has a bit of a buzz, that there's a way. I still have shows that I haven't watched that I just know I need. Like, I haven't watched Orange Is the New Black, but I know, okay, it's there. I can watch it whenever I want to. It's there. Like, I need to go on a vacation
But that's
with
part of the problem too,
irritating
right?
relatives. So that's I
It's
can do
always
it.
there.
It's always there. But my show, for example, is really, it needs people to know it's coming on in the second season and to want to find it and to have it easily accessible. And it's actually not. It's not easily accessed right
So
now.
in this era of too much TV, how do you drive tune-in? Do you think it's the network's mission to deal with, or how can you contribute to the conversation?
Well, I feel like my only responsibility is to write the best show I can.
Yep.
That's it. I really do think I'm fine for the network to say, to read a script and to say, we're concerned about this element because are we, I mean, actually, this is not a conversation that's taken place on this series, but, you know, are we emasculating this character? Are we telling a story that's too complicated for people who watch every third episode? I'm fine with those responses, and in this case, working with Showtime right now, which is the first time they're actually very good partners, and they are very respectful of differences of opinion with their showrunners. I find them to be really terrific, but their input is really valuable. But ultimately, I think it's how they choose to promote the show. For example, actually, this is really interesting to me. But I don't know if any of you have seen the logo for Masters of Sex, which is, it's the word, you know, it says Masters of Sex, and the E is turned upside down, and it looks like a woman's nether regions, and it's actually a brilliant typeface. And we on the show thought it was the worst thing we'd ever seen in our lives. We were really distressed by it. We thought it was just it was kind of tawdry and cheesy, and it turns out we were just wrong. I mean, we were wrong. We were being very prudish, which is very odd for women who write.
But they talked to you about it.
Yes, they did
Yes.
talk to us about it, and we objected to it, and they said, this is a good thing, and they were right. They knew that, I mean, they were advantaged by having a show that was titled Masters of Sex, which is already kind of titillating, but it was smart. They knew it's a perfect example of the responsibility they felt to bring a certain audience to the show that maybe our work alone, it didn't necessarily make obvious what the show was. And I think that's a really good example of them sort of taking the ball and running with it.
I can tell you
You know,
that
oh.
logo and name is critical in
yeah.
bringing an audience in, and I think more so than people really realize. Because you have an IPG that needs to do a lot of work, and just the advertising, the marketing, and the look of it really has the whole don't judge a book by its cover thing applies here, because people do judge, and they judge fast.
Right.
Well, that's a good segue, Mark. You just rebranded your network. Do you want to talk about that decision?
Well, that was really about, first of all, the TV audience is largely female. And if you want men, you really have to do sports. I mean, that's just sort of the net. However, we were women's entertainment, and, it just felt like, why are we alienating men? To the point of my wife watches it, I'm going to hang out and watch it with her. There's still 150 million men out there. So it feels like, why say don't come in? And we had a really interesting experience happen with our Bridezilla's show that was syndicated. And it was, clearly it's a female skewing show. It was in Philadelphia in syndication in the number three station. And at 7 o'clock, it was number one with men, 18 to 49. It's just so crazy, because it wasn't on a woman's, it was sort of on the
What did you make of that? What was it, just an anomaly?
environment. I think it's because if it's a pink channel with flowers and stuff, no guy's going to watch it. But if he's hanging out and it's his regular, KABC or whatever it is in Philadelphia, he sort of watched it. And it is a good narrative. I mean, it's, sort of it's a typical story. It has all the elements. But I think environment really matters a lot.
Studying the show, what not to marry.
Well, who not to marry?
Not to marry.
So we stripped all that away. And, we realized that we really has a much more powerful meaning, especially today in this sort of socially networked digital world, of meaning all of us who have the same interests and beliefs and likes. So we felt that was a much better way. So we're really taking the notion of we as community and of us instead of women's entertainment.
And what has the response been?
Well, it's been 3 days, so it's been great.
All good.
We have not, one of the things, because I feel because of all of this sort of instant networked world, nothing is a secret anymore. Yeah. So for me, even though we're not really launching it until fourth quarter of this year, we felt the idea was big and enough that I didn't want someone else to take it. right? Because a lot of people will know about it. So we really just put the logo and a few style frames out so we could say, okay, we own this, and you'll see it in fourth quarter.
Mara, I cut you off before.
Oh, no, I was adding to the conversation about the partnership between a network and, you say how, at the end of the day, it has to be a good show. It has to be a good show. I don't think, we're all time drained. And so where are we going to spend our time is you want to show up. And so it's interesting, the original title of Beer Mary Jane was Single Black Female. And they had the same idea that, one, there was another show on the air called Single Ladies, but it was more about, we want to invite everybody to the show. We don't want to say you're not
Right. welcome
by putting the word black in the title. And they were right. I fought it, and they were right. And I'm going to still take the credit outside of this room.
We'll never tell.
No, seriously, no. I tease. They were right. And even it's very interesting the way the pilot. I was very to your point about I want to get the content out there before somebody else does this. There's
Right.
a lot of shows about women, and I'm tackling some of the same storytelling. And so for the pilot that aired as a movie, that it aired in July, and then the series didn't air until January, I was not happy with that. However, from the perception, when you get outside of your own bubble, the perception was that was brilliant. And I'm like, okay, yeah, well, he did that. But no, I'm teasing. No, but it was sort of really that the movie really sort of got our audience just sort of
Tee them up.
completely. I mean, and January was, we almost, I mean, they were getting mad and they were rattling the cage, like, when is this thing going to come out? But it really served us. So I think sometimes just you give them the best product and you have to trust that it's all really going to work out well. But the third partner is the audience. I feel like it is a partnership between the producers, the network, and the audience. And if you really want something on the air, and I think the audience is understanding that very quickly, that if we don't support something on air, I think there is a understanding of if we don't support it, it will go away. So, and that's what's interesting for programming for a television audience anyway, because my mother remembered when the color TV came into her house and everybody. Well, now.
So do I.
And so, but we're not talking to, the storytelling has to, I mean, we're telling stories to audiences that know the audience, I mean, that know story really, 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 really well. And so it's very difficult you got to stay on top of the audience, and they want more, and you're not getting enough money. And so it's very interesting to keep all those balls in the air, but at the end of the day, it just has to be good. It has to be good art to sell to audiences
Has to be a
that demand it.
partnership.
Yeah.
I really do think I believe our producers have to give us the best shows, and then it's up to us to really make sure people know about it and do everything we can. In a world where there are hundreds of thousands of messages bombarding all of us all day long, so how do you stand out? And how do you have patience? Because I know in cable, sort of mid-tier cable, if you're not TNT or TBS, the first year of a show is the marketing, for the most part. Unless you have some big push that starts like a movie. Usually if you can look at every cable show, from Tosh to Pawn Stars, all of them, they've all season 2 or season 3. Because it's impossible. First of all, you'll never have enough money to advertise it like a theatrical film where everybody knows about it. And it needs that word of mouth. It needs that, just like like Twitter takes a year. These things take time now.
And to your point, too, that especially in network and especially in a first-year show, they'll look at the audience you have, which in our case was young women. And one of the first questions is, well, how do we get everybody to watch a show? But the danger is that in trying to appeal to broaden your audience, you're going to lose the audience that you have. And so our strategy, and I think it's been successful, is to take what you have and double down on it and hope that, that brings in people, because you can't be everything to everyone.
No.
And so, you have to have the integrity to take what you're good at and stick to that and hope that word gets around and the more diverse audiences come to you.
Can I ask you a question, though? Is that the programming people or the ad sales people?
I think
Because I would never say that.
I think it's no one in particular. It's just this kind of even self-questioning. You look at what's working, who's watching the show, and I think your instinct is, well, I want everyone to watch the show. What can we what can we do to bring in adult men and older women and all these different demographics, and there's absolutely no one or two decisions you can make that'll accomplish that other than to make a great show.
Right.
And so it really is a season one thing because everyone is after you and everyone is trying to, it's so hard to break out and so hard to succeed that you run the risk of just kind of taking what you're doing great and just spreading it out into nothing. And so, yeah.
What mistakes have you seen other shows and showrunners make? I mean, I don't want to point fingers, but just looking at the landscape.
Can I just say Prison Break Season 2, when they were no longer in prison? I thought that was pretty ridiculous.
Fair enough.
And they just became The Fugitive. It was ridiculous.
Case in point.
Well, I won't point to other shows, but I will say a few years ago I had this heartbreaking experience with Fox. I produced a show called Lone Star, which well, then you were the only people, let me just say. And here's the thing, I have to say, I don't know that I've ever gotten a response to a pilot that I've made in my life, like, best new show, like all of this. We were canceled within, I would say, truly within 20 minutes. We were done by the time the first episode aired. And one of the things that, it was so shocking to me because they put a lot of money behind it. We premiered opposite the premiere of Dancing with the Stars. And I am hopeful that a decision like that wouldn't be made today. It happened I think it was about 4 years ago that this happened. But the understanding that the first year is where you get your audience, that there is no longer a world where the future of a show is determined by what it does from 9 to 10 on its premiere date. And it was such a disheartening experience that it actually took me out. I said I'm done with network television. I just can't. I can't invest that amount of time and be kind of cheered on by a network only to have them not see a single not see one number, and to say we just can't support. We believe in it. We loved it. People didn't come to it, and it's over.
I look at the quarter-hour ratings. And if they hold or grow, I'm like the show. I'm usually consoling producers like, no, the quarter hours are growing, relax, it's good, the show works. That's really all I can use rather than looking at a big number. If the story is holding whatever audience, it could be this big.
Right.
If it's holding, it means you have a show, and you have to
Kevin
commit to
Riley's
it.
left Fox, so there's like a space now for you.
I love cable because you can leave things on and let them grow and nurture.
Right.
It's not do or die every 5 minutes.
Right.
It's really hard for a creative person, I think,
Right.
to put something out there that you know is going to take time, especially now, right? And
There's
just,
so much competition.
It's 5 minutes in, it's not working, let's pull it, right?
Yeah.
That's why broadcast is sort of in this struggle in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Well, I do think that they need to resign themselves to making a commitment of a certain, I mean, particularly if there's good feeling behind the show. I mean, I understand that you have to fill out a schedule, and sometimes there are comedies that no one is behind from the moment they're put on the air, but and dramas as well. But this realization that it's going to take, that you have to nurture an audience, you have to cultivate an audience, and it cannot happen with a single episode or 2 episodes. That I think it takes a certain amount of time to build a hit, and I don't know. I think only reality shows can sort of break out overnight.
No, they really can't either.
No?
That takes a season as well, unless you have something so
So
big,
Right.
right? But usually, look, Tosh, I mean, I can give you the whole list because I've looked, Tosh, Duck Dynasty, all these shows started very, very low ratings. Took them a season, and then boom, but everyone doesn't realize they were on that season.
Right, I see.
It just suddenly becomes the second season is the first season to them. I always remind people Star Trek was only, I think it was 10 episodes, right? And then it was over. The original. And look at what sort of, all these years later. You
And
know,
it
it's
didn't
just-
live in this climate of 130 channels.
Right? It just sort of grew out of a very engaged fan base.
Well, to tie a couple of these threads together, I've found at our show, we've gotten really lucky, and the network's been very supportive, trying, especially because we're on a night that they're really trying to build into an event, which has really worked to our advantage. I think to be in the mind of a person who's high up in a network, nobody knows where the audience is. They know where to find them. they'll look at a Hulu number that's great, and they'll say, well, God, that's great, but I wish they were watching on TV. And I think quality shows are surviving longer than they would have otherwise, simply because there's this kind of experimentation going on right now. How do we know that people are watching the show. How do we find them? How do we figure out, make it easy? How do we make money off of them, frankly?
Nurture them.
And nurture them and grow the show. And so in the last year or two, I think that excitement has kind of allowed things to get a little bit better, simply because it's almost an expectation that overall network numbers are going to go down from the previous year in general. And so it is allowed cooler stuff to kind of breathe a little bit. And so hopefully that'll be a continuing positive trend. That's
I also
what I've
think
encountered.
for women audiences, we're looking for, how do I say this? I think women's images are growing and still expanding. And I feel like earlier on, not necessarily now, and it's exciting time, obviously, for women in television, but I think it's fun to see different types of women, and they're not all completely gorgeous, or they're not all completely one thing, which has been sold to women. Women are looking for their nuance. For instance, I remember one of my turnoffs about sometimes when you want to show a powerful woman, she always had to carry a gun, and she always had to look. I mean, it's like, well, I feel powerful, but I don't like guns. I feel. How do you say powerful? And there's many ways to say it. I'm not the only way to say it either. I just think that women are looking for a lot of more expression about who we are, and it's one of my fun things of exploring it's part of Mary Jane's life is the workplace, and this whole notion of when do you cry in the audience, can you cry at work is an old thought, but what does it look like today? Mm-hmm. And we cry in our cars. So it's like, before we go to work, and that crying is not a bad thing, as opposed to it being depicted before as such a weak thing. Mm. And I just feel like those are I think it's small moments, minutia, nuance, difference. It's beautiful to have Mindy Kaling's face on television. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's beautiful to have Gabrielle's face on television, next to Margaret Avery's face, next to Raven Goodwin's face. I mean, it's those sort of
It's authenticity,
yeah,
isn't it?
but also it's not being sold too. Like, I think men have been sold, and not to leave them out of the discussion, but men have been sold certain images, but it's been okay for some reason. There's been some quirkiness here and there, and forever it was the overweight older guy married to the toothpick of a woman much younger. I mean, that image was just done to death, and so now they're trying to find variations within that image for men. I think women want variation for them, and I don't have to just be powerful and look this way. Or at least if I am going to do it, what are her challenges? Shade her differently. I think we're looking for shades. I think we're looking for our humanity. I think
It's about a range of characters.
Yes,
it's about
yeah.
finding someone.
But then I wanna
Look
ask
at
you a
Lizzie
question.
Kaplan on Masters of Sex. I mean, that's a fantastic female character that we haven't seen before.
yeah, exactly.
So why is everybody being airbrushed to death? And they're airbrushing out half their arm. It's with all this authenticity, I think there's this push to make everybody look like an oil painting.
Well, I actually struggle with that too. I mean, because TV also still represents fantasy. It is a bit of escapism, and so partially you are selling a little bit of that life. Even like the character, I wanted to say things that people just won't say. That's a fantasy. Most people are not going to say some of the things that she says, and she's so purposely. There's a little bit of selling that. There's no doubt about that, selling that. But then I've also looked for how I can anchor it in authenticity, because we should be able to shake that. Jamie Lee Curtis can't be the only one out there sort of saying, and Dove
Right.
saying, this is who we are. But it takes us to help feed that to a machine that only wants to airbrush you, and then turn the thought around, and that comes with the audience participation and saying, yes, yes, yes.
It actually feels like TV is ahead of that to me. Like TV is
Yes,
ahead of
yes,
the whole
magazines.
print world.
Yes, yeah, magazines, yeah.
I think with 130 channels and Netflix, there's more opportunity for more, look at Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
I think that's a good example for more
I will say,
variety.
though, I have never done a pilot that, it's sort of a joke, is that the first note you're going to get. is hair.
Yes, oh God.
It's like, it's unbelievable. You kind of like can take a pool, like, and just say, okay, here's the network for you, and it's like we're calling about her hair. It's so out of
I have never
proportion.
given that note.
Oh, I'm so
Don't
glad.
I've never
But it
have.
is, I cannot, honestly, I would add a year to my life if I could just tack on all the conversations I've had about hair. It is, and it's always about women's hair. It's never about men. It's a huge preoccupation with how women look. And I feel bad that I actually look at Kerry Washington, and in my head I just think, oh my God, she's so beautiful. Oh my God, look at her. She's just so beautiful. I mean, I am also aware of what a beautiful woman looks like on television, and I understand how that draws people in, and it's it's very tantalizing. It's very tantalizing. So but it is. I have not seen that preoccupation change in the 2 decades I've been doing it. That it is always, what does the woman look like? How is she pretty enough? Is she pretty enough to carry a show? What are we going to do with her hair? What kind of wardrobe are we going to put her in? Yeah.
Do you think women audiences are looking for that, or is that what network executives think women are looking for?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, let's say this. When you present it, they really do like it. I mean, we do like fashion. We do like clothes. We do like shoes. We do like purses. We do like pretty homes. We do like these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think that we have to sort of include, just like you say, you can't say single black female, or you can't say women's television. You've got to include more to the party in the offering of the content. So, like, for instance, Gabrielle is the door to perfection, and that's part of her problem in the storytelling, and it's reflected in that. And so if I'm going to do that, then how can I creatively say, look a little closer, she's not just pretty for pretty's sake, it's a story point, we're trying to say something about this character, about swinging for this magazine life. And so, again, it can be a part of the content that also drives you in, although Gabrielle Union is beautiful to look at. And you're like, I'm going to go to the gym after this episode.
I think reality does a better job at depicting real people. We have Tina and Eric on Mary Mary are not models. There's no one on their show that's a model. They're just who they are.
Right.
And we show it warts and all. And I think that people do appreciate that as well. And I think perhaps in a script environment, it just puts people in a different mindset, because we don't cast. First of all, I've never even, if you're talking about the hair and not the story, I think that must be a great thing, because it must mean the show's great. If that's what you're worrying about, is hair.
They move on to
perfect.
story. They just start. They just
start with hair.
They start with the hair.
So
Although
that's
I wrote I was going to write a pilot for a network a couple years ago, and it was sort of a high-minded pilot. It had to deal with issues of. It looked at black and white issues in the contemporary South, and I was very excited about this pilot. And then, I won't name the network, but I
Write it down.
I was in the process of writing it. Where you have the index cards and you're trying to figure out how do we end the second act? And I turned on their air, so I was watching a show on the network, and there was a young woman who was waking up in the morning, and she had these false eyelashes. It actually looked like there were like spiders sitting on her eyes. And I actually called and said, I can't do the show for you. Really it seems kind of petty, but I thought, if this is a successful show for you and it is the model of what you want to do, I'm just going to go down a path and be thwarted, and I would rather sort of prevent myself from doing it now. But it was sort of like a come to Jesus moment, where I just thought, like, okay, you're doing this, which has its value, but I just can't. I couldn't do it.
Come to Maybelline moment?
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Yeah.
I feel like we are
I
making
sent back
some.
the check. Yeah.
even on this panel, we're making some generalizations, because I think when you look at, the #1 show for women was Walking Dead, right?
Right.
Super Bowl, #1 for women. ESPN is like 40% women, which most people don't even realize. So I do think we're taking some scripted stuff, and then we're just overlaying other aspects of the female audience that I think are generalizations.
Absolutely. I mean, I think women are the #1 watchers of television. It's our biggest.
So you're going to get the biggest,
But for example, what I found on, this is shocking to me, is that what I found on, maybe it was Netflix, I don't even know the network, maybe it's ESPN, that they're doing these short documentaries called 30 by 30.
Yeah.
ESPN. Okay. I don't even know the sports. I don't know soccer. I probably have
They're
watched like
riveting,
20 of them, because it's just about the storytelling.
Yeah.
Well,
It's like, it
to your
is
point of-
unbelievably compelling storytelling, and it puts it in a forum that I am usually not exposed to, and I watch those as if they're fiction. I mean, those are incredibly, that to me is fantastic television. Fantastic television.
Just to go back to your point about Walking Dead, I mean, I watch Walking Dead for the storytelling. I mean, I think it's great
Right.
characters. I mean, I think to me it's about survival. And, the zombies, oh yeah, there's these zombies and they seem to eat some gore, but yeah, it's awful. But like, I know that I am not watching it for the reason the rest of America is watching it. And
I
sort
watch
of
it for the
accept-
hair. It's
And on that lovely note, I'm going to open it up for Q&A from the audience. So if you've got some questions, you in the second row? I'm sorry, microphone.
First off, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out. I'm in a very fortunate position right now where I'm producing a reality, kind of a traveling motorcycle show. And we have females on the show that ride everything the guys ride. And so we have this great kind of, you have this conglomeration of, guys versus girls, kind of what's the theatricality of that and where that kind of takes you. Looking now at the marketplace on a much bigger scale for like movies and television, there's a lot more kind of strong female characters out there, especially that's coming down kind of like the superhero stuff with Marvel and everything. I think Peggy Carter just got picked up to run. And I've talked to a lot of women that say that's a great thing. How do you guys see kind of the sexual objectification versus strong female characters who are sexy, and kind of what path is that taking? Where do you see that going?
I think that there's a larger conversation for women's sexuality. For instance, I don't think that there's enough conversation about you could take the most beautiful woman, but she could be a bore because she's so beautiful. She don't have to work at it. Like, where's that conversation? Where's that scene versus the woman that feels like, I'm just using obviously generalities. I think we're not digging deep enough into the plethora and the nuance of women's sexuality, that we're only thinking about it in one or two, maybe three ways.
But when it comes to superheroes, they're also objectifying the men because they're also hot guys. It's a lot of talk about who's playing fill in the blank.
Is someone complaining about
that's
that?
a part of the conversation too. Like, even as a woman producer, we had a scene. It's like, as a woman, I objectify men, but that's not portrayed, and it's not always like I'm sinister about it, or I'm pulling him into my office and having a casting couch. I don't do it that way either. But it's just not. I just think there's a lot more conversation around the area of sex. Probably why there's a wonderful show called The Masters of Sex. But I'm just saying, it's just that I think it's okay to find more nuance.
Yeah, and in our show, it's important to us to have, lead character who doesn't always look perfect and isn't the perfect weight, but she's still allowed to be like crazily horny and like jumping all over. That's a real thing too. Like someone who lets everybody can be sexual. You know what I mean? And I think that's just the world we live in. And I'd like to see more of that in those Marvel movies. Hypersexuality.
In the Marvel movies.
First round?
Hi, great, really amazing panel, I gotta say, really informative. Thank you for coming out. The one question I had, well, not really a question, well, yes, a question, sorry. It was more to do with the fact that the two of you have now, being Mary Jane and Masters of Sex, you guys have really touched upon sex, and I thank you for that because I think it's the first time we're having that conversation.
Thank you.
You
An
know,
amazing sneeze.
God
Oh
bless
my
you.
goodness,
Bless
what
you.
an amazing sneeze.
So, God bless you. It's okay.
Yes.
Now, my question is the shorter time to tell the story helping you intensify the storytelling of being able to get really into the nitty gritty? And like for you in being Mindy, you kind of have to stretch that. Now, I think you're at 12 or no, are you 22?
We did 22 last
You
year.
did 22. You had to stretch it, whereas you guys, you can really have those intense moments. And both of you are on cable. Do you like the shorter seasons? Are you enjoying, or would you like to have an extra episode here or there?
I would not like to have an extra episode. I'm shocked. I used to do like 24 episodes in a season, and then I would have 2 months off. And now I don't know why I'm doing 13, and it seems to take like 15 months. Yes, I know. I don't understand. I can't figure it out. It's like a magic trick. It's like, why is this taking longer to do less?
Right.
It's a unique, for me, this is the first time I've ever written about something that's based on real life. And, Virginia Johnson was a fascinating woman and really a pioneer. And so I can hide behind her story and say that I am telling a show about a powerful woman. But she was an extraordinary woman who faced a lot of actually contemporary issues. She slept with her boss. But she was also the reason that study, it's the reason why Masters and Johnson, to some of us, I guess, we know who that is. It's because of Virginia Johnson. So I find it's hard. It doesn't matter if it's 22 episodes. It doesn't matter if it's 13. Storytelling is always hard. It's always hard. And you want to tell big enough stories that people think they're seeing something new every week and not go so fast that you're moving from plot point to plot point and not playing enough nuance. But I will say, in terms of storytelling, one thing that for me is fantastic is I don't have any commercials. And that's changed the way I tell stories because there is no obligation to get to a question before there's a tampon commercial. Like there's no arc up and what's going to happen, and then you resolve it. And I find that to be it's just freeing. It's really freeing to just tell a story without having to deal with those commercial breaks. Because I think you would say probably it in some ways that format dictates the way you tell stories, isn't it?
Oh,
First
absolutely.
act, second act.
Yeah, and in ways good and
teaser,
bad. I mean, you have to think in terms of tentpole moments throughout your episode, but a commercial grid formalizes that. You have to have a certain number per episode. Yeah.
I'm enjoying the process, and I've decided I'm going to do it. I've decided because it can be overwhelming that I have to stick to the pace of my character, and that I hope it'll go as long as it'll go for me to tell all that I want to tell. But that's tomorrow, and I can't worry about tomorrow. Today, I'm going to take the pace that she has, and it goes at her pace, and I just lock it in for what I'm given, and so because you can go crazy.
Now, being Mary Jane 8 again?
Well, no, actually, we moved to 12, and I actually enjoyed the 12. So I think the sweet spot for me for being Mary Jane would be in the anywhere from the 12 to 13. I don't think anything more than that would.
Compromises it, don't you think?
Yes, I think because when you start off in a pace, that becomes the pace of your series. Like if I went back to the girlfriend, no, I need 22. That's what I need, But.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My question's for Marc. When looking at in an age where there's a need for content across the board, and as Debra's pointed out a couple times, the multitude of networks that are out there and programming choices, are you finding that, because you'll see shows on channels that they don't really fit on that, Travel Channel has stuff that's not really right?
Right.
Your
Haunted
network is
hotels.
women's entertainment, and so
It's not women's entertainment anymore, it's we, remember?
We,
The collective.
okay, so you've now decided to open yourself up to new show pitches and whatnot. How are you getting that message out there, and what are you saying, okay, will it take now more pitches and more shows and?
We're still going to be about authentic relationships, and we're still going to really target a female demographic. It's really about not excluding anyone. It's really not, so we're not going to suddenly have, arm wrestling on the air.
Strongest man
There goes my
competition?
pitch.
I doubt you'd see that. You're just going to see more high concept, maybe some shiny floor shows about relationships. It's still going to be about real life.
Did you say shiny?
Floor.
I don't know what that is. What is it?
Shiny floor is like Minute to Win it would be a shiny floor.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's very
I
inside
didn't know
baseball. Yeah.
But all about relationships, because that's what the Braxtons are, that's what Tamar and Vince is, that's what Marriage Boot Camp is. Our sort of, the heart of our network's in really exploring all different kinds of relationships, and that you want to have a conversation about in all different ways.
But a combination between scripted and unscripted at this point now,
Yeah.
or? Okay, both. Okay, thank you.
In the back.
This poor guy. Front row,
Hi, we've talked a lot about representations of women on camera. Wondering, maybe this is mostly for you, Mark, since this is a lot of scripted and there's so few women at your levels in scripted. But reality has a lot of female showrunners and a lot of female-owned companies. Digital is unlimited. How does that, bringing more women in who are established professionals, affect the courting of the female audience when you speak about women behind the camera?
It's an excellent question.
I really honestly look at everything as who's a great storyteller and who isn't, because it is about telling stories. And I really don't, personally, it's not like, we get a woman for this because we need a female showrunner, right? I think it's, what's that?
Do you seek them not because they're women, but because they're great? Or do you see what I'm
There are
saying?
women that we seek because they're great. There are guys that we seek because they're great. I think it's about talent to me. And I think talent comes in all different sizes and shapes. And you have to be passionate, because this is a crazy business. You have to work your ass off 24 hours a day only to not get it the way you want it. Thankless. Everyone's copying you. If you're, it's a million things. You have to love telling these stories and dealing, especially in reality, with lots of things happening that you did not plan on happening. And it always seems to go that way. So I have, Sally Ann Salsano is a great, passionate, crazy, out of her mind producer, because she'll live with the cast. I mean, she just goes right into it. She has such dedication. And that's really what I look for. Who's going to tell the best story and be so dedicated? And that, I really don't care who it is. There's a small pool of people that live for it.
But I think that does happen. Like, for example, I'm doing some projects with AMC right now, and I know that they feel like they have a very male-oriented audience. And I think the fact that they called me is an indication, I'd like to think that it is because they're interested in the kinds of shows I do. And I think I'm going to choose to believe, there's no tokenism in it, but they know what I do. So the fact that they reached out says that they are interested in doing shows that probably have more women in them, that maybe tell a story that's driven by women. So I think sometimes that does happen on networks, particularly when their rebranding is too big a word for what AMC is doing. I think they're just looking and seeing, we've been really good at this. This is our, we've got a huge hit on TV. We lost Breaking Bad. We're losing Mad Men. Those are sort of, you think of them as male shows.
You don't have to depress me. You don't have to depress me. It's my company.
Right. Well, it is, and so I think that they are. They're looking to open it up a little bit, and that's when they hire maybe not women, but they hire people who tell stories that might appeal more to women.
Can I just say that I'm a guy running a women's network. When I did True TV, which was a white, heterosexual, redneck channel, my boss used to say to me, if your audience had any idea was making the shows they love, they'd have a heart attack. So, I think it's about really getting to know your audience and loving storytelling in any iteration. That's what makes the right person for a show or for a network. And I really believe that, because I just immerse myself in those worlds. and I figure them out.
All right, probably last question, front row here.
Thanks. Earlier, Mark mentioned that the show Duck Dynasty had low first season ratings and boomed in the second season. So, I mean, I think anyone could answer this. For if you're ever running a show that has a low ratings in the first season, what encourages you to renew the show for the second season and give it a chance?
The quarter-hour ratings. That's all I look at. I don't even look at the overnight. You know, if the show is holding an audience, means the story works, means the show works. Be patient. Figure out where you failed in bringing the audience in. You know, but that's the best tool we have. Because if the audience drops, it means it's not working. That's not marketing. That's just the audience is leaving. You don't want anyone to like leave the campfire when you're telling a story.
But I think one of the things that's very helpful in that regard, and for example, I applaud Showtime, who just picked up Penny Dreadful in the middle of the season. And I'm nothing specific about that show, but what that says to an audience is it's going to be around. And I think early pickups, like when they always talk about shows on the bubble, you're not doing yourself any good. That there is,
you're saying it's like 50% off.
That's right. So that when networks see 2 or 3 episodes of a show and say, we're picking it up, that it says to an audience, you can invest in this because it's going to be around for a while. And it's helpful for writers, it's helpful for hiring a writing staff, it's helpful for a crew, but it is really, really helpful for an audience.
And I would add to that, which is a really great point, it's also helpful to, if I say it's good, you're saying to someone by us, and we're picking it up, and if you missed it or if you didn't like it, maybe you need to doubt yourself and take another look. It's validating. I know I'm good. I don't know what you're doing, but over here, we're doing it, and so maybe you need to rethink what you thought or didn't give it a chance. And it creates another story in the middle of the stories of what's going away. It's talking about, so it's another marketing opportunity to say we're excited about what we're doing over here.
Definitely. Well, on that note, I want to thank you all for coming. This has been a great panel. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.